May thy light guide us in the darkness. Burn the heretic, kill the mutant, purge the unclean. Master of mankind, grant us strength.
Faith, Steel, Lasguns. The gameplay world premiere for Warhammer 40,000 Darktide just dropped, and I am at full mast, because there's no longer any question about whether this will be a true spiritual successor to Vermintide in 40k form. The Steam page was updated directly after the Game Awards aired this trailer, and I'll read it verbatim because it really cuts right to the core of what we're looking at in 2021. Built on the legacy of Vermintide 2's highly praised melee system, Warhammer 40,000 Darktide introduces deep and balanced gunplay to the mix. Master the balance between ranged and close quarters combat as you fight through a slew of enemies, feeling the impact of each swing of your chainsword or blazing fire from your lasgun. Step into the dystopian and violent world of the Warhammer 40,000 universe, where you play as the part of a convict-turned-agent who serves the Zealous Inquisition in its mission to exterminate Chaos Cultist corruption. Choose your class and customize your skill set and loadout, all tailored to suit your own style of play, and upgrade your gear, customize your character's looks, and prove your worth to the elusive Inquisitor. So, just to set the stage here, as we covered in our last Darktide video a few months back, we're plunging into the hive city of Tertium on the planet Atoma Prime to root out a chaos cult known as the Admonition. Hive cities are massive, sometimes planet-spanning megatropolises that often reach out into the lower edges of space, home to billions of the Imperium's finest citizenry. They are incredibly dangerous places to live and visit. Essentially, hornets' nests of drug proliferation, gang wars, pollution, and not a small few chaotic incursions. Being sent in as part of a tiny team to shut down an entire chaos rebellion in a hive city this large is essentially a death sentence, as the group of guardsmen from the first trailer probably quickly found out. So I guess our Inquisitor is relying on a penal legion of sorts, as each of the game's 4 main characters are quote-unquote convicts turned agent, and all have something to prove or atone for. In fact, we have our very first look at the Tertium 4, or 5, doesn't matter, consisting of a Ministorum Priestess or Zealot, a helmeted veteran guardsman of some sort or inquisitorial stormtrooper, an Ogryn, and a guard or Tempestus officer, or possibly even inquisitorial operative wielding a power sword. With that said, it's important to remember that Fat Shark is likely following the class-based system of Vermintide 2, and that's further backed up by the fact that this is a 4-player co-op game, and only 4 characters have thus far been revealed. So the only way that works is if you give players choice when they're the last player to join a lobby, which is the whole reason Vermintide had 5 heroes in the first place. It is possible there's a 5th or 6th character waiting to be revealed, but at the moment, I think it's safe to move forward with the presumption there will only be 4 playable characters, each with a wide array of customization options and specific classes to draw from, which means their backstories, abilities, and gear will change depending on what you pick. And it also means if you don't like a particular class from the only remaining character when you last want to join a lobby, you have the opportunity to switch up their gear and playstyle, which is functionally just like playing a different hero. We'll talk more about each of these individual characters in a moment, but I want to hit the first impressions first. And I gotta say it, the trailer was bananas. It's pretty much exactly what I was hoping for. Meaty and visceral melee combat with a heavy emphasis on putting holes in people with combat shotguns, hotshot las, and autoguns from downtown. And just like V1 and V2, it's clear right off the bat, Fat Shark are looking to do true justice to the grim darkness of the 41st millennium. The aesthetic, the atmosphere and that sense of being completely overwhelmed by hordes of terrifying enemies hit all the right notes in the trailer. From the dark and spooky environments to the crack of a power hammer sending a Poxwalker's face spiraling across the room. It's kind of interesting because some of the animations from Vermintide look like they're being reused in the gameplay here. You can see some attack chains from the two-handed hammer and the falchion present in the trailer, but that stuff could easily be placeholder while the game's being worked on, and frankly, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'm all for new attack patterns, but there's only so many ways to swing a sword or falchion when a horde of diseased rodents are swarming your group, so I'm not too worried about that aspect. What is important is that the weapons have a distinctly 40k feel, that they're not just completely reskinned from Vermintide as well, and it appears we're getting that 40k feel here. Like when the guardsmen bust out a chainsword, we get the whining and revving of those adamantium teeth, and the attack patterns are similar, if not identical, to Vermintide's, but the weapon behaves differently when it impacts flesh. It stops and it bites deep into bone and muscle rather than just slicing through smoothly. So it behaves differently than the weaponry we've come to expect in Vermintide. And of course, when you get that lightning crack from a power maul when it smacks some corrupted guardsmen, that's what you want to see from a thrice blessed weapon of the Emperor. And as we saw in the trailer, we're not just facing down the Bloaty Boys and Poxwalkers of Papa Nurgle. We've got Chaos Cultists and Corrupted Imperial Guard to contend with as well. We've got mutated doggos and plague Ogryns bounding through the bowels of this hive city. And that's likely not even scratching the surface of enemies we'll see. Like I said, this is Vermintide in 40k. They're making no attempts to hide that fact whatsoever. And to the best of my knowledge, not a single special enemy type like a Packmaster, Gutter Runner, or Blightstormer has been revealed up to this point. But I fully expect Fat Shark to follow that same blueprint here, so Plague Marines, Demons, or Enemy Psychers are all possibilities, and more than likely, they're probabilities, considering how similar they are across both Warhammer settings. If it works in fantasy, and it works in 40k, it makes sense to port over some of those assets. It's a simple way to flesh out bad guy diversity. Now, Poxwalkers are the game's main enemies, obviously. They're the tallymen of Nurgle grouping up in hordes, swarming players, and using numbers and brain-dead aggression to take the team down. And apparently, they're not too smart, so there's potential for sneaking past them entirely. There are going to be stealth mechanics, or setting up a strong point before ringing the dinner bell and making them all come your way. But on the flip side, they can hang out quietly at the tops of ladders or hide in dark corners, waiting to punch you in the face at the right time, because they've been programmed to be much more patient than the Skaven were in Vermintide. And Plague Ogryns are indeed a confirmed enemy type here as well, likely as some sort of mini-boss like Rat Ogres or Bile Trolls that we've seen before. I will say I'm very curious about the mutant doggos, because they don't look like Fleshhounds of Khorne to me. They're not that distinct shade of crimson that makes them typically stand out in a crowd. They don't have those scary frills around their neck, and they have none of the Blood God's iconography either. So my guess would be that there's some form of plague-touched mutant doge used by the Traitor Guard to maybe flush you out of the tunnels. And actually, we do know a little bit about this turncoat Chaos faction. They're the Mobian 6th, a traitor regiment seeking to fill the power vacuum left in the wake of Nurgle's mucculent blessings on Tertium. But a couple things to note here. For one, Darktide is confirmed to have a distinct horror element. We get glimpses of that during the trailer in the claustrophobic, dark hallways of the Hive, and lighting and flashlights, both the standard kind and the Imperial Guard issue kind, will play a large part in your adventures through each map. Blackouts will be a common gameplay element, plunging entire sections of the Hive into utter darkness, forcing your team to stick together and use limited light sources to acquire targets, which is incredibly immersive in and of itself. I mean, a Poxwalker zombie horde is already relatively creepy, right? When you have to listen to their shrieks in pitch darkness, with only some lasgun fire lighting up the sewers, that's about as atmospheric and 40k as it gets. That is despair and hopelessness wrapped in a neat little bubonic package. More than that, we'll be seeing acid rain on some levels in this game. It can slowly damage you if you're caught in the open. New objectives that force a team to split up into groups of 2. You'll have puzzle solving, stealth mechanics to get past ambient Poxwalkers, and of course, a hell of a lot of banter, which is exactly what we want. Wouldn't have it any other way. So back to the characters, equipment, and class-based system. There's a female officer with a mohawk and shaved head, a guardsman, an Ogryn, and a character who looks like a zealot, priestess, or some form of acolyte from the official state church of the Imperium. It does appear this squad is lacking the Carapace armor or Hellguns you'd expect to see with a Casterkin or Tempestus Scion squad, so these characters may not be the elite of the elite when it comes to the Astra Militarum, but again, that's just based on what we've seen in the trailer. With a class-based system, I see no reason why we couldn't have a Casterkin or Grenadier subclass focused on heavy weapons as a branch off one of the main characters. And I fully expect to see plasma guns, bolt guns, flamethrowers, grenade launchers, a wide array of power melee, and some more exotic stuff as well, like the Charonite claws for our Ogryn buddy. They'd go a long way in a game like this to make him feel more abhuman and unique when he's ripping and tearing Nurgle's little friends. We already have some form of frag grenade or thermal detonator, multiple types of las guns with different attachments, auto guns, and possibly a ripper gun for the Ogryn, which is a short-range shotgun that can fire several shells at once, or a single heavy shell like we saw in the trailer. So I'm quite sure there's a lot still waiting on the wings to be revealed, but it's looking pretty cool so far. And I love the fact that they're giving the Ogryn a different visual perspective. Just like Barden, Gorikson, the Dwarf Ranger, but this time we're about twice as tall as anything else on the map rather than being half as tall. And you can feel his strength when he's cleaving through Poxwalker hordes with that combat knife. I mean, it's basically a sword. He's slicing through the entire horde easily, in comparison to the chainsword for the guardsmen that kind of gets stuck after hitting only one or two enemies. But the class that really caught my attention in this trailer was the Ministorum Priestess, shouting litanies to the God Emperor of Man as she purged the causeways of chaotic taint. It seems like every character in Darktide will have some backstory of failure, if they're referred to as convicts, so my guess here is that she was censored by the Inquisition and press-ganged into this suicide mission to atone for her misdeeds, or perhaps even more likely, signed up herself as a form of penance. So she definitely feels like the Zealot or Unchained class of Darktide, with a heavy focus on melee combat centered around that power hammer, which looks incredibly fun to use. And yeah, it is still using Vermintide animations, but again, it could be placeholder, or it could just be something that Fatshark decided like, hey, this works, why are we changing something that isn't broken in the first place? So I can't really say I'm disappointed by the characters on offer yet. I am very happy about an Ogryn being playable, but a lot of that will hinge on what they do with the classes themselves. And I really think Fatshark are at their best when they're doing wildly different outside-the-box stuff, like Grail Knight for Kruber or Dark Elf Shade for Carillion. I want them to get exciting with it and not just go for the stuff that makes the most perfect sense in the lore. Again, I think lore is an important aspect of this. You can't do 40k and not do the lore justice, but at the same time, you want to make sure you have as much variety as possible, and that is how you get a bunch more variety in Darktide without needing to create a million different characters from scratch. So give us the Ogre Chair Knight with a power suit and rending claws, give us the Pyro class with flame-based weaponry, give us the Admech Tech Priest as a what-if scenario when a hero decided to trade in their flesh for computer parts as an offering to the Omnissiah. I love Guard. I love that we're seeing a truly human perspective here, but there's other cool stuff we can add for classes as well, and I don't want Fatshark to skimp out on that. Now, shifting gears here for a second, one of the big questions we all had going into the announcement was, how would a ranged focus actually work with so many enemies carrying autoguns or las? I mean, there are only a handful of enemy types in Vermintide that even have ranged capabilities, like Ungor archers or rattling guns. There's only a few on screen at any given time, and they're more of a nuisance than anything simply because of their nature. Rattlings can't hit the broadside of a capital cruiser, and Ungor archers have the weakest, saddest, most pathetic attempts at bows you'll ever see. So if Darktide isn't a cover-based shooter, which it doesn't look like it will be, how do you make it through missions on harder difficulties like Cataclysm without being absolutely ass-blasted by lasgun fire? I mean, it's the same reason Warp-like Zales were never added to Vermintide 2. I think balancing the true nature of a laser projectile that is more than capable of burning fist-sized holes through human flesh, with gameplay that simply isn't conducive to standing still in cover for long periods of time, I think that might get a little bit tricky. It either means there aren't going to be a lot of Chaos Corrupted Guard with shooty-type weapons, or they're going to have the piss-poor aim of Star Wars Stormtroopers, because without a cover system, you just can't make ranged enemies accurate, deadly, and common. It won't feel good to play against. So I think that might be one of the core puzzles Fatshark needs to solve moving forward. How do you add a gameplay system where people move through the level and can't take cover really, but can get shot and damaged severely by las or automatic fire from a far distance away. That might be relatively tricky to do. Now, it is confirmed there will be no Space Marines. That should be fairly obvious, but just gonna nip that in the bud once and for all. That is confirmed, and I'm cool with it, because this would be a brisk walk on the beach for an Astartes squad, and we don't want a situation like in Deathwing, where poopy enemies with auto guns that wouldn't be able to scratch Ceramite in any way, shape, or form, scratch Adamantium in any way, shape, or form. We don't want a situation where auto guns are somehow killing 10-foot tall behemoths in tank armor with a single 3-round burst. Watching my Terminators die like that in Space Hulk Deathwing felt awful. So it is just as well that we are regular humans here, and regular abhumans, that could realistically be hurt and killed by that kind of weaponry. A Space Marine squad just wouldn't be. Like, the only thing we've seen so far that could actually hurt them, that would be a true threat to them, is the Plague Ogryn. Now, I know some people have expressed some worry about the focus on ranged gameplay here, that somehow Fat Shark won't be able to do it justice, and I guess that's a possibility. I will not call the sound design as it pertains to ranged weaponry in Vermintide flawless by any stretch of the imagination. There are some that sounded really good, especially in Vermintide 1, like the handgun, and popping off headshots with that thing in both games is super satisfying. Like, I love it. It's super great to watch a Storm Vermin just flop dead across the map after getting its head blown off with a nice meaty crack from a handgun. So I'm quite sure Fat Shark can recreate that here with las guns and automatic weapons. And it just so happens we got some of that in the most recent update for Vermintide with the Master Engineer anyway. But there are some low marks there as well, like the new Masterwork pistol, which sounds quite anemic and boring when you're slaying rats. I mean, it just doesn't have much punch to it at all. It's fun to use, it doesn't sound very satisfying though. From what we saw in the trailer, the las gun, auto gun, and ripper gun gameplay looked pretty solid. Decently punchy, reasonably impactful without going completely crazy and overloading our senses with huge booms and sound effects. I mean, I can see right off the bat, this already looks way better than Deathwing's core gameplay did pre-release, and Fat Shark has proven they can create satisfying gunplay, so we're already off to a pretty good start. I don't know that it will be the highlight of the game. I still kinda expect Melee to take that crown, but at a minimum, it doesn't look like it will drag Darktide down in any way. If they can make Grudge Rakers and rifles and steam-cranked Gatling guns fun to use, I'm pretty sure Fat Shark can handle a 5-round burst from a heavy stubber or a plasma gun as well. One of the big questions here is, of course, performance, which traditionally has not been Vermintide's strong suit, and Darktide is looking gorgeous. I mean, this is a clear step up from what we've seen over the last 5 years in terms of lighting and graphical fidelity. It's looking pretty gorgeous. So, will it run smoothly? I don't know. Only time will tell. I'm certainly hoping I don't need to unlock the 3090 to get 60 FPS in this game, but it's one of those types of games. I mean, horde gameplay across Left 4 Dead, across a lot of games like that, typically can have some performance problems because there's a lot going on screen at once. So, fingers crossed on that front. No guarantees. If we look at Vermintide's history, it's not had the best performance over the last 4 or 5 years on people's PCs. But I do know that Warhammer 40,000 Darktide has the potential to be one of the first good 40k shooters in history. That is a lot of pressure. That is a lot to live up to, but it's looking promising so far. Keep checking back on my channel to get your Darktide fix as we move forward, because unlike a lot of these other scrubs, I'm actually good at video games, I'm actually good at Vermintide, and I actually know what I'm talking about. So whenever news drops for this game, I'm going to be right there to cover it, and the second I can get my hands on it, there will be a storm of gameplay coming your way. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next video. Let me know what your thoughts are on Darktide.